And again, I'm Kathy Kuntz. I'm the Executive Director of Cool Choices. I'm delighted you could join me today for this conversation about incentives and motivation. I know that very often on our webinars, I say that topics are close to my heart, but really and truly, this issue of motivation and how incentives play into motivation is one I'm especially intrigued by and excited to talk about. I spent the first close to 20 years of my career in traditional energy efficiency programs, and the last decade really focused on human behavior and how we motivate people. And I obsess sometimes about some of the work I did in the traditional energy efficiency realm and wishing I knew more then about motivation. So I'm excited to talk to you about this today, and hopefully we'll have some good questions. So as a little bit of background for those of you less familiar with us, Cool Choices is a nonprofit. We work with businesses and whole communities, and our expertise is really motivating people to adopt sustainable practices in a way that facilitates culture change. So our quest with our partners is always to create a new normal, to create a culture where everyone is making choices that reduce resource use, where everyone's saving energy, where everyone's recycling, to really make that the pervasive thing that folks do in these organizations. And obviously, you know, all of you are also working to influence people's behaviors and actions in your organizations. And really, we're at this moment where what you're doing is so important. So we've accomplished a great deal in the sustainability realm in the last few decades. You know, it I think is really important sometimes to step back and go, we've come a really long way. We've made technologies like solar panels cost effective. We've expanded the adoption of technologies. There's greater awareness of issues. At the same time, we have this new IPCC report that's telling us that yes, we've accomplished some important things. We have to do a lot more, a lot faster going forward. And really, it's in light of that mandate to accomplish so much more, to really transform the way people are living and working in a way that dramatically reduces our greenhouse gas emissions. It's that mandate that makes me today, you know, want to talk about. So what does it take to motivate people? How do we think about motivating broad swaths of individuals and businesses and communities in the way we need to meet these climate critical goals? And, you know, very often when we first think about this, we think about incentives. We want people to do something different. We essentially think about how we can bribe them into doing that. And, you know, we do this throughout our lives. We certainly are surrounded by business models that do this. If you get a paper version of the Sunday paper, it's filled with coupons saying to people, if you buy our dish detergent, we'll give you $1 off, kind of thing. You know, think about all of the ways we provide financial incentives. There's a bargain on these cars this week, kind of thing. You can get this financing. All the ways that we try to buy our way to the actions that we want people to take. And so we'll talk about kind of how that works and how that doesn't work for us sometimes. You know, when we think about motivating people, there are really kind of two broad categories of motivators, and it's a continuum, of course. But, you know, on one end is extrinsic motivators, so things external to me. This is that transaction category. This is the, I'm doing this because you're paying me to do it, because you're requiring me to do it in some way. It's some external force is pushing me to do this. And the thing to always keep in mind about extrinsic motivators is that they're transactional. there's an if-then statement here. If you give me a coupon, I'll buy your product. If you give me an incentive, I'll opt for the Energy Star light bulb. If you give me this, I'll give you that, kind of thing. Transactions work as long as both parties are willing to fulfill their obligation for the transaction. Part of the challenge with transactions in, for example, the energy efficiency space is over time some measures are less cost effective, and you don't want to have to pay consumers to keep doing them when they're already in their economic interest. But if you've started on a transactional path, it's really hard to get off that path. The other end of the continuum is intrinsic motivators, as you would well expect. This is you doing things because you want to do those things, because they're in some way reflective of who you think you are. So you do them because they feel good to you, because you're proud of what you're doing there. I always feel like this is a picture of one of our past program participants, and I always feel like she's my kind of go-to model for intrinsic motivation. She feels really good about what she's accomplished here in terms of recycling. And on that, so when you think about extrinsic versus intrinsic, the reality is that those intrinsic motivations tend to persist, and they tend to be expansive in some ways. So if I think of myself as someone who is conscious about energy usage and turns off lights before I leave rooms, it's pretty easy to help me expand that to how I drive. That if I wouldn't think of leaving a light on, why would I idle my car? And you can see the way you can grow those behaviors, that you can have an intrinsic motivation that over time snowballs into much bigger attitudes and ethics around these issues. And really think, as you think about what we need to accomplish from a climate perspective, we need hearts and minds on our side. We kind of can't afford to just be in this transactive place where if we provide the right incentives, people will act. We need people to want to act because they believe it's what they want to do. So as I say that, some of you are thinking, so are you telling me that there's never any rewards ever, that people just have to like somehow become intrinsically motivated and then it's all good? And I'm not saying that. I'm saying that essentially we need to think about how to offer incentives and to deliberately offer incentives in ways that build intrinsic motivation rather than that create this very fragile extrinsic motivation that we have to keep feeding. And one effective way to do this is to randomly catch people doing the right thing. So rather than making this a transaction where if you bike to work, you will earn this incentive all the time, it's and then randomly one day I decided to go out and meet people at the bike rack, and I gave everyone who biked to work that day maybe a coupon for a lunch deal, or fresh fruit, or granola bars. It kind of doesn't matter what I give them. And a couple of things happen here. First, that kind of spontaneous, random reinforcement has the potential to generate buzz. You want people talking about, telling other people, I was recognized for doing this right thing, because that reinforces that intrinsic motivation. I am a person who does right things. I was recognized for doing a right thing. It also, though, kind of jars that it's not that this is something, you're not doing this right thing because you got the reward. It's not an if-then statement. It's a surprise. And surprises are, very effective. The other piece of this that can be really effective here is recognition. I just alluded to that. But really thinking about ways formally and informally to recognize people for doing the right thing. These photos actually come from a sustainability program we did, I bet it was 5 years ago now. And this was a law firm. And at the law firm, they made this trophy that is the Cool Chooser of the Week. And every week during their program, someone won this honor. And the honor was that you got to hold the trophy and have your picture taken. And then your picture was posted on the law firm's intranet. You didn't get to keep the trophy for the week. In fact, I think as soon as the photo was done, the trophy went back into whatever secret vault it was held in. So what these people got was this photo of them holding the trophy, being recognized as a leader on sustainability. And I want you to really look at them. I mean, you know, they look like they just won the 3rd grade spelling bee. They are very proud of what they're doing. And that's a powerful thing, that recognition, that so in a variety of ways, creatively saying, Jim is doing a fabulous job contributing to our recycling program. Mary has been helping us figure out carpooling to events and has helped us reduce our fleet costs by X, Y, and Z. Sort of 2 things happen when you recognize people. So there's the ripple effect that happens with others. So when you say, John is doing a great job reducing energy, 4 other people think, well, I'm doing a great job. Why didn't they notice me? And they step it up so you're more likely to notice them. But it's also really important what happens with John. So when you say, John is doing an excellent job at this, as a human being, we have a strong need to be consistent. John now feels like his actions are a lot more visible. He has to live up to that recognition you got. You pointed out that he's the kind of person who saves energy. So now he needs to make sure nobody sees him not saving energy. So there's this really important reinforcing thing that goes on there as part of that essentially intrinsic motivation that you're building. You're helping John internalize the idea that he is the kind of person who does these things. And that can be very powerful. As opposed to what happens when we use money in all of this. So there's good research, and at the end I'll reference Dan Pink's book, Drive, which I think is an excellent sort of summary of these issues, and particularly the issues around money. But, you know, it turns out that while we tend to think money motivates people, it's much more complicated than that. And, you know, there's good research that in some situations, the potential for big monetary rewards compromises our performance. That essentially there's a part of our brain that's just thinking about the monetary reward and can't even think about the thing we're supposed to be doing. But it's also the case that money, more than anything else, kind of clicks us into that transactive mode and makes things not be transformational or emotional or powerful. They're a transaction. And I want to give you a really specific example here, because I think sometimes we talk about that and people think, sure, it can't be that bad. So I want you to visualize with me. You're 24 years old, and you are a couple of months into a relationship with someone who you think might well be the love of your life. They invite you home for Thanksgiving dinner. It's a grand affair, parents, aunts, uncles, the whole siblings, and the food is magnificent. Okay, it's this amazing feast. you are overwhelmed and dazzled by the food and the conversation. And at the end of the meal, you turn to the hostess and you say, this was amazing. I can't even begin to describe how wonderful this meal was. I feel so lucky to be here with you today. What do I owe you for this? Does $100 cover my portion? Think about that for a moment. Because, odds are this is the last time you see that potential love of your life. Because turning something that was emotional into something monetary does not sit well with us. And I think particularly at this point when we recognize that we need to make things happen at a transformational level, we need to be really mindful about how we use financial incentives so that we're not sort of taking the meaning out of these things. Let me give you another sort of interesting example of this. A research project where they were trying to see what would motivate people to give blood. To one group, they talked about how this is an important thing to do. It's a way to contribute back to society. To the next group, they said this is an important thing to do, and we'll pay you like $10 to do it. And the third group was told this is an important thing to do, and if you do it, we'll donate $10 to help pay for the distribution of the blood. That first group, where people were told it was an important thing to do and not offered money, more than 40% of them went ahead and donated blood. The second group, where they were offered money, it was less than 30% donated. Interestingly, when the money was going to go to charity, not to individuals, the donation percentage was back close to the first one, lower 40%. So think about how, there's a way that people want to do the right thing, but when we turn that into a financial transaction, we sometimes can miss our opportunity to capture them. A way to get around that is to think about this charitable piece. It's a pretty powerful thing and we've seen this work in some of our programs where the law firm is a good example. So at the end of their program, the winning team got to direct a grant from the law firm to a nonprofit of their choice. So instead of working for personal gain, for turning this into a kind of external motivation, they were contributing to a cause that they cared about. It became a way to reinforce a priority they had for themselves. And that's, a way to play a little bit with if there's often when we're in organizations where it seems like there's a determination that, well, there has to be some financial reward in the end, we often go, well, what if we constructed a way for that to be a donation to charity, to give people back the meaning about this, to not make that transactive. Again, our big quest in this is to accomplish much more, much faster than we've ever done before. We need to do things in a way that get people excited about what they're doing, that have them feeling good about what they're doing, feeling proud of what they're doing, feeling willing to go the distance that we need them to go. We need now that emotional commitment, because this isn't going to be an easy path. We need people to really believe in what we want them to do. We need people to really believe in what they can accomplish and what they can be part of. And I think an interesting model to think about here for fostering that shared identity, Seth Godin does such a good job of talking about people like us do things like this. How SMART initiatives increasingly build a kind of, brand identity, where there's a sense of this is who we are as a cohort. People like us do things like this. People like us use public transit. People like us pay attention to our consumption. People like us avoid disposable plastics. People like us do things like this. That's that powerful thing you want to get to. You want to get to that identity where people are sharing that, where they're talking about that. And that's the core of certainly what we do in our program. So for those of you not familiar with our model, we typically are going into workplaces or multiple workplaces across communities and engaging people in a game-based program where there's a reason for them to talk about what they're doing, for them to share their sustainable practices, and to see how those practices add up across a whole community. We're pounding that people like you do things like this. People like you do things like this. That group identity there. The other thing I want to just mention here as we're closing up and getting ready for questions is that I mentioned earlier Daniel Pink's book Drive. If you're interested in this topic of motivation, this is a really readable book. Pink has certainly there are some YouTube videos. There's probably a couple of TED Talks out there talking about motivation and kind of the surprising ways that motivation doesn't quite work the way we sometimes think it does. I really strongly recommend that. And with that, I want to open things up for questions. So there is on your little GoToMeeting side panel, you can open that up, and there's a spot there where you can put in a question. And then it's always good if Kathy can get the little box to work so that she can read them. Okay. So the first question, how do we achieve employees' commitment to their values in a corporate setting? So really everything I'm talking about definitely works in a corporate setting. You want I think one of the big ahas for us early on at Cool Choices, we tend to do baseline surveys at the beginning of each engagement. And we were in a commercial construction firm, and we asked employees if sustainability mattered to them. And 75% of employees said that sustainability was important to them. We asked them if it mattered to their colleagues, and only 45% of employees thought sustainability mattered to their colleagues. There's this gap. What I see about you in terms of what I observe you doing during the day and what I don't know about you. Part of our challenge in this realm is that so much of what we do to conserve resources, potentially other people never see that. They don't see the things we do at home. They might not see the things we do in our offices. And so really they're left seeing that, oh, Kathy printed this out at the printer and it's not double-sided. She must hate the planet. When really that, might be an anomaly kind of situation. And so I think fundamentally part of this is giving people the opportunity to understand that other people share their values and it's okay to exhibit those values. So, when that 3/4 of the population at Myron started to understand that they were 3/4 of the population, we could flip that culture. People there became comfortable saying to new people, that's not what we do here. We do this. People like us always recycle. People like us don't idle vehicles. So it's getting to that place where those shared values are more visible than they were before. And really, in a corporate setting, you have terrific opportunities to catch people doing the right things and showcase them in ways that can build other things. The next question here. Interested in the difference between management action and capital investments to reduce carbon. I think capital investments are intrinsically complicated and about money and are equally important. So yes. Making a point that on the business side of decision making, thinking about one boiler versus another, or a major investment in a renewable energy project versus another investment for the company. When you're thinking about a transaction and then thinking about the motivations behind that, incentives play a different role, and I think that's a very fair point, than they play in some of the other spots. At the same time, I think in the efficiency realm, we need to be cautious that we aren't always saying to people, if you do anything to be efficient, we'll pay you to do that, even if those efficiencies are clearly in your best interest to do. So the best efficiency programs have rules that we aren't going to provide an incentive if your project pays off in typically efficiency programs might say in 2 years or less. I would argue that even that's a little crazy. There's nowhere else a business gets that kind of return on their investments that really pushing them to know these are things that any smart business should do, and thinking about how transactive that becomes in there is the piece. Getting top management and stakeholders to invest in sustainability. So I think one of the things to pay attention to there is how much the investor community is paying attention to investments in sustainability. The data is something like 80% of institutional investors are looking at corporate sustainability reports before they're investing in companies. And that's because there's increasingly good data that companies that report on their sustainability are performing better financially. So I think there's an argument there about, and again, it's people like us. Successful companies are managing their waste, are managing their use of resources to maximize productivity of that use. People like us do things like this. We need to do that too. And then I was thinking about this question. Great, we have lots of questions. I want to get through. So if a person has already defined, put a behavior in that kind of financial lens, that this is a transaction we're making place, how do you help them think about other motivators here? And I think sometimes it's bringing back in a context. So people will, this happens a lot in the efficiency realm. People will, if they're thinking about insulation, they'll want to talk about, well, what's the payback on that? And I think it's okay to talk about multiple kinds of payback. So one of the paybacks on insulation is that it's soundproofing. So when you insulate the walls of a house, you're going to hear less outside noise. One of the paybacks of insulation is increased comfort. That rooms are going to be more similarly temperate kind of thing. And trying to help people think about, so would you put a value on any of those things? And trying to give them a way to make that conversation a little bit broader than just, how fast is this going to pay for itself? There are lots of things that you know, and there's a way that we've constructed over time, particularly in the energy efficiency realm, this conversation that is just financial. So we talk about furnaces and insulation and appliances kind of in this purely, this will pay for itself in this much time. This is the dollar savings here. When people think about their lives in much more complicated ways, and sometimes they need us to help them see that. Maybe the most effective example I can think of that is around the high efficiency clothes washers. I remember when the front loading clothes washers were just being a thing. I can remember being at an event with a clothes washer, sort of talking up the benefits of, and we were traditional energy efficiency people. We were talking about water savings and energy savings. And this woman stopped who had a front loading clothes washer, and she started talking about how she loved the clothes washer because the clothes came out drier. The washer and dryer took the same amount of time to do a load. And she was saying, I don't remember, she had 3 kids and she could do 4 loads of laundry in a day, whereas previously she could hardly get 2 done, and she was always waiting for the dryer to catch up with the washer. And she was sharing this story, and it was clear that probably 6 or 8 other women in earshot who heard this were going to head out and buy a new washer, because she shared a value proposition. This makes laundry easier and faster. That was a way more compelling story than the story of the kWh savings. And so really, I mean, you know, part of this is to claim back the humanity in these various areas, to understand what matters to people. What matters to those women is that they're not standing around waiting for a dryer to finish. They have everything matters to them more than waiting for the dryer buzzer. Giving them that connection. And with that, I try to always keep these to half an hour. We're a little bit over, and I don't like to go too far over. You've got my contact information if you want to talk more about any of this. Thanks so much for joining me today. Thanks for everything you do to make sustainability and climate mitigation happen out there in the world, and have a great week. Thanks. Bye.